Hello everybody and welcome to another new player tip video. Today we're talking about one of my favorite investigators. Oh, you're chewing, I'll pause the video. Joe Diamond is one of my favorite investigators just because his play style is very fun. He's definitely one of the most unique investigators, and he has one of those things where like a lot of times I've seen people play Joe Diamond and they're like, this is the most miserable experience of my life. And these tips, I'm going to help you try to avoid it, because I think that Joe Diamond's really fun. You just need to kind of play around his ability a little bit. So, Joe Diamond, he has a stat line of 2-4-4-2. When the investigation phase begins, reveal the top card of your Hunch deck. Until the end of the phase, you may play that card as if it was in your hand, at -2 cost. If it is still revealed at the end of the phase, shuffle it back into your Hunch deck. Now, you might be thinking, what the heck is the Hunch deck? So the Hunch deck is, notably before we get there, your deck size is 40. But your deck must include at least 11 insight events, including Unsolved Case, which is your weakness, which we're going to get back to in the future. During the setup of the scenario, you must choose 11 insight events from your deck, one of which must be Unsolved Case, and shuffle them into a separate Hunch deck. So you're going to have 10 insight events that you're going to be taking out of your 40 cards, shuffling them together, and that's going to be an additional deck that you're going to be drawing from each turn.
And that actually means that you have a card pool of 29.
No, because it'll still be 30.
Oh, yeah.
Your deck size is actually 30 because the signature weakness doesn't count. But you're 100% right. Your deck is actually still 30 in gameplay.
Okay.
But otherwise, when it's all sleeved up, your deck is 40. So this is really cool because your Hunch deck, you're going to reveal the top of your Hunch deck each turn, and you may play it. So you're basically getting an additional card in your hand at -2 resource cost each turn. This, I think, he's the private investigator, and I think it's a flavor home run, right? Just getting like the Hunch, and you have to follow your Hunch to try to do something, which I think is really cool.
It's also wild because you can side deck effectively.
Yes, you can side deck.
This is the only ARKHAM card I know of that can side deck.
Yes, you can, and that might be a tip that we get into this video. You might be getting ahead of me here, which is pretty sick. So that's a really cool thing, but I think the most important tip that I want to tell you about your Hunch deck is have your Hunches be active as opposed to reactive. This was one of when Travis and Bryn first played Joe Diamond, the card pool was really small. He suffers from a smaller card pool because you're kind of forced to play certain insights in your Hunch deck. But with a full card pool, you can actually take advantage and play just entirely active insights for your Hunches. So like, comparing the 4 we have here, working a Hunch, just a 2-cost fast, play only during your turn, discover or clue your location. In Joe Diamond, this is just get a clue. It's just get a clue off your Hunch deck. Preposterous Sketches, play only if there's a clue on your location, draw 3 cards. It's a 0-cost, draw 3 cards. We compare this to Evidence. Play after defeat an enemy, discover a clue at your location. You need to, like, the way it needs to work is you need to reveal the card, have an enemy, be able to kill that enemy, right? So that's a lot of like pieces as opposed to just, I think I would like to draw 3 cards. That feels very nice. We also have Crack the Case, which is a legitimately very good card, which is just after an investigator discovers the last remaining clue, you get resources equal to the Shroud, distribute as you wish. Once again, really good card, but not great in the Hunch deck. Because, while it's easier than an enemy, you still would rather just have your Hunches hit 100% of the time. That's what makes Joe Diamond really powerful, in my opinion, and that's being active as opposed to reactive is good. I would still play Evidence and Crack the Case in my Joe Diamond decks, but they wouldn't be part of my 10 Hunches that I choose at the beginning. Yeah. Because you can run more than 10 insights, because as you said, that's when sideboarding can come in, when you can kind of adapt your Hunch deck to what comes. Because Joe's ability reduces the cost of Hunch by 2, that changes how you can evaluate cards. Suddenly now, every card that costs 2 has just like had its head turned for evaluation. No Stone Unturned is just a tutor in the top 6 cards of an investigator's deck. At 2, it feels like good, but not great. At 0, that's a pretty good ability, and it's also super active. It's not reactive, right? Delay the Inevitable. This is just, it prevents damage or horror the next time you take it. It costs 2 up front. But in Joe Diamond, it's now 0. It's also fast, which is also great for playing out of the Hunch deck. And then I have Working a Hunch and Preposterous Sketches here as other examples. Yeah. So the nice thing about Delay the Inevitable as well is that if it's very rarely carried over, because you see the forced when the Mythos phase end, you must either spend 2 resources or discard Delay the Inevitable. If it didn't stop dealing, if it didn't deal damage or horror, it goes. You'd have to pay for it, right? But in Joe, now you just have to pay 2 for that, where other people, if they do want to keep it, costs 4. But really, it's not really one of those things that you're not looking at carrying it over. But it just costing 0 is really sweet.
Question, what happens when Joe does use a card and it's technically discarded? Does it go back into your general discard?
It goes into your general discard pile.
So it doesn't go back into your Hunch deck?
Correct. Then that's actually, we can look at his Elder Sign. That's a great question, because his Elder Sign is +1. You may move an insight event from your discard pile to the bottom of your Hunch deck. Likewise, if you don't play what's on your Hunch deck, it's going to get shuffled back in as well.
Perfect.
If you don't play it for your turn. And it's also at the start of the investigation phase, so you actually can look at there before anyone else gets a chance to go. You can like go with the Hunch and like build a group, a plan as a team with that.
Amazing.
With all that said, don't worry too much about losing value with insights that cost less than 2. That is, to me, a losing proposition in Joe Diamond. Treat your Hunch deck as just card draw, because that's what it is. It's just an extra card in your hand, and just draw good cards. These 3 cards here are all 0 cost, but I would still run them in my Hunch deck pretty much all the time. Burning the Midnight Oil. It's active, it gets you resources, it gets you a clue. Cryptic Research is insane in the Hunch deck. It's just draw 3 cards at Investigator Location. It's fast, it's expensive for experience, but to me, my Joe decks really go to the moon once I've put Cryptic Research in my Hunch deck. And then Deep Knowledge, it's like Preposterous Sketches, but I would actually, like in a lot of my Joe decks, I run Deep Knowledge and Preposterous Sketches because it's card draw and it's free. You just get it into your hand for free. So while it might feel bad to play things that cost less than 2, that's only half of Joe's ability. The other half is that you get a card in your hand each turn. Yeah. Sometimes your hunches won't show up at the right time, or you'll be faced with suboptimal cards on the top of your Hunch deck. This is the biggest problem with a lot of Joe Diamonds. It happened to Travis and Bryn. They would get a hunch and be like, poop. You know? That's poop. That's not what I want to see right now.
Yeah.
But don't always wait for the perfect time to play a hunch, because getting a card out of your Hunch deck at the right time can be a game changer, as opposed to seeing it again and again and again. Because if you don't, it'll get shuffled back in, and you might just see the exact same hunch again next turn and be in the exact same place, and you're not going forward on value. So like logical reasoning, maybe it's only healing 1 horror. Maybe you were waiting for a terror and no one got it, right? Maybe with Scene of the Crime, there's no enemy, but you just want to discover a clue to get it off of there. While these two are like, Scene of the Crime is more, in my mind, reactive as opposed to active, going back to that first tip, it's certainly still something that I would run in the Hunch deck and just look at it as potentially 2 clues at one time, but most likely just 1.
So question about this too, because let's say for example, I ran a logical reasoning, didn't know about the card pool. There's never going to be a terror. We're doing really well. Can I still play the hunch for those 2 mind?
No, because it's not in your hand, so you can't commit it to skill test.
Dang, I was going to be like, that's a power.
No, but you can't do that. You can't commit it. You can only play it. You can only play it.
Okay.
However, what you could do is if it turns into one of those things, that's where like adapting the deck, which is the tip that's going to be coming very soon. But I think what is important here is don't always wait for the perfect time to play a hunch. If your hunch gives you value and you're playing, and you could just play it. Because in my mind, what's a death spiral for Joe Diamond is when you start seeing the same hunch again and again that you don't want to play. That's a sign that 1, that hunch should not be in your hunch deck, and 2, you may need to be more aggressive with your hunches, and then you'll win more as Joe Diamond. Joe Diamond is actually one of the investigators that I have the best win rate with. He's very good for my playstyle, but it was because I started to be very aggressive about my hunch deck. It's not the perfect hunch, it's just a hunch, and go for it. There we go, the sideboarding. Because you'll need more than 11 insight events, so you can change what's in your hunch deck from scenario to scenario. You will need more than 11 insights in your deck to do this. Or more than 10, rather. You will need to be able to have more than the 10 you put in.
During the setup of each scenario, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so you can do it each scenario. Each scenario you can change up the function of your hunch deck, which is really cool for like when you really know a scenario. You can start teching in different ways through your hunch deck, which is really fun. Let's take a quick peek at Joe's stat line. I'm going to just ask you, Eric, as you're learning Arkham, what does Joe's stat line tell you about Joe?
Joe is either going to be punching everybody or Joe is going to be clooving. But Joe is not going to be running and Joe is not going to be braining.
So to go a bit further, this is 100% true. He's very good at clooving and fisting. Wrong word for that. But he has really good active stats. His active stats are very good. You can flex without putting too much effort into flexing. You can just get clues from 2 shroud locations just passively with Joe's ability. If you're just planning on killing things, you can still just like use your book passively to pick up things as it goes. If you build a true flex with Joe Diamond, it's very powerful because your book and fist will start getting really high and you're going to just be really good at what you do. However, with all this said, we got to take a look at his other 2 stats. His defensive stats are very weak. So he's very so like how how I said that Joe's Hunch deck should be very active and not reactive. That's Joe. He's very active but not very reactive. He has 2 in brain and 2 in foot. So 2 examples of common types of cards that we see from the encounter deck. Rotting Remains, test brain 3 for each point you fail by, take a horror. Grasping Hands, test foot 2 for each point you fail by, take 1 damage. These are 2 cards that generally, they're rarely seen together, but this is like the kind of the thesis of encounter card design, right? So while most investigators will have one that they're okay with, not Joe. Not Joe Diamond. He's you're kind of just like Jesus take the wheel during the Mythos phase with Joe Diamond, which I really like in the flavor of the Private Investigator. He's very headstrong, like he just dives in. But you need to have, oh my God, we're in another universe right now. 1 second. We got to find the right video that we're in. Give me a second. We're literally traveling through time. Which one is it? Here we go. There it is. Okay, let's go back a bit. That's so funny. I like the one that that just spiraled into infinity. Do you see that? It just goes. All right, back on track here with Joe Diamond. You are going to want to pack some tools to help defend yourself. Take the initiative. Get 3 icons. You can use it during the Mythos phase. It loses icons for each action people take. Scientific Theory was a game changer for Joe. Gives +1 fist and fist and book, giving you 5s in your active stats, but also can soak for a bunch for you. We have Emergency Aid, which I will play in my Hunch deck. If you want a little insight, there is the Edge of the Earth card in the thick of it. That you get 3 experience and you take 2 trauma, physical or mental. I'll just take physical trauma and then put this in my Hunch deck and just fire it off as soon as I can if it shows up.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so it's like one of those things you can just counteract with that, which is pretty sweet. And then also a card like Forewarned, while you wouldn't want to put this in your Hunch deck, it can just stop treachery cards from doing things. And you getting clues is really easy, and you picking up that clue again is really easy. So you're going to want to pack some tools to help defend yourself.
Forewarned is actually a great card.
It is.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it's like perfect Seeker encounter card protection.
Yeah.
All right, let's check out Joe's signature weakness. I will say I usually like to end these videos with a crazy tip about the guy, but Joe is very flat, straightforward. He doesn't really have a crazy game-breaking tip that we can talk about, so we're just going to talk about a signature weakness. Unsolved Case. It goes in your Hunch deck, so it's not in your actual deck. It's in your Hunch deck. It's a 4-cost event. Place one of your clues on your location with the highest. Place one of your clues on the location with the highest shroud, and then removed Unsolved Case from the game.
That sucks.
If Unsolved Case would be shuffled into your deck, you add it to your threat area instead. For the remainder of the game, it gains Forced. When the game ends, Joe Diamond earns 2 fewer experience for this scenario. So, yeah, it sucks. People hate losing experience. I will say, though, sometimes the right choice is to just lose the experience. I've done it on purpose. It's not common, though. I don't recommend it, because also it sucks to lose experience. It has an upside where in the final scenario you don't care about it. You basically just get to turn off. But what it does is it basically just takes away one of your hunches. However, there is some stuff that we can talk about in Unsolved Case in terms of gameplay tips. Number 1, Unsolved Case's cost is reduced by 2. That's why it costs 4, right? So it still is going to cost you some resources, but it doesn't actually cost 4. It is reduced by 2 because it is in your Hunch deck and it is played. It's an event that you can play from your Hunch deck. I also do love that it's an insight. They really went hard on the flavor for this one. You will see unsolved case in a scenario. You're gonna see it. Because unless your scenario just like you're done after a few turns, there's only 11 cards in your Hunch deck, and most scenarios go more than 11 turns. There is a chance, yes, you could shuffle the insights in, you can keep shuffling, you can never plan, but if you're playing Joe Diamond proper, you're gonna see your unsolved case, so you want to plan for it. So this is about having 2 resources and just being prepared, having an action saved for it. These are things you always need to be aware of. However, you don't actually need to have a clue to play unsolved case. While it does take your clue, it's not a cost. It's not as an additional cost to put the clue there. So if you have no clues, you can play unsolved case, and it only costs you an action and 2 resources. So just something to be really aware of for that.
So how do I force unsolved case to always appear on the first turn of the game?
I'll tell you how. You're not going to like it, though. You play Geared Up. Geared Up is a permanent asset that on your first turn, you take 3 fewer... You can play up to 5. You can play any number of assets from your hand, but you can't take any actions. Which means that you actually can't play your unsolved case, so it just guarantees it's going to, by chance, randomly be on top every time, so you just lose 2 experience. That is officially the only way to get it on your first turn. But another thing is just that, an actual serious answer. You just be very... An active character like Joe Diamond, you can be really active against the game.
Yeah.
So just be aggressive with your clue getting and make sure you're advancing the act as soon as you can. Or if the scenario allows you to spend your clues to give slight progression on things, just make sure your clues are spent first.
Of course.
Yeah, so just basically be very aggressive with your clues, and then if you don't have any, you won't get that extra little piece of punishment for this, which is really nice. Because it is one of those things, you have to put it on the highest shroud. It does mean that those are usually victory locations. So it could potentially lose victory, especially if you leave it behind. There's a few tricks in the Secret class as well that you can mitigate that. You can grab the clues at a distance. The other thing you do is just if you haven't seen it yet and you know it might be coming, stand on the highest shroud location there is. Because then you can put it on your location and grab the clue back easier. Save the time on it.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things where if we look at what Working a Hunch did, the 2-cost fast gain a clue from your location, it basically that balances out the unsolved case, which is really nice. So it's not actually a particularly tough weakness.
No.
It's just the thing is that it can sometimes show up at a very inopportune time. So you just have to always be aware of it because you will see it. And that's Joe Diamond, the private investigator, the man with only 2 brains, which is a lot less than a lot of other people, and only 2 feet, and that's very normal.
It's weird that other people have more.
Yeah. I didn't talk about his signatures just because... Unless the signature, I think, is actively defining for the investigator, it's a good signature. It gives you, it takes up 2 hand slots, but gives you hand slots for tools, so you can have your guns and magnifying glasses. It's one of those things where it's cool, but it's not to me part of the defining identity of Joe Diamond. It's definitely his Hunch deck.
It's impressive how ARKHAM has been able to effectively borrow other game mechanics and card game mechanics. But by attaching them only to specific investigators, it's added a lot of flavor and difference to various investigators.
100%.
Because I want to play Joe Diamond now.
I know. They're all... in my mind, every investigator in this game...
Except for basic Schizotool.
Yeah. And that's mostly just because, his ability isn't good enough. It's I think most investigators have an ability that's interesting. And it makes them fun to play, coupled with their deck building. But I think that there's something in there for everybody, which is why ARKHAM, I think, is so infinitely replayable and why the community is the way it is, right? Because deck building is so deep. Huge thank you to all of our patrons. Oh my God. I'm glad we recorded these first day, Eric. I'm already... At the end, I wouldn't have been able to do
You just fell into time and space, so I don't blame
you. Speaking of time and space, let's record the Boundary Beyond. So thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one, and as always, GG's.